Enjoy the music for a minute before we let personality Eric Robinson explain.
This is the most nervous I've been about doing a video. The whole Origins in plain sight thing means that I may have to give away some of my secrets. And this is my biggest secret of all. It's my sample survival kit. A box of secrets that, well, I got my first sample when I was 16 and I'm now 53, which means I've been sampling for how long, Robbie? Math. 37 years?
Sounds about right.
Sounds big.
A lot.
Yeah, 37 years. For the first time on camera, I'm gonna let you look inside my secret. This series is basically documenting a thing that I'm doing, which is basically building my sound set from scratch. I deleted all of my samples and I'm starting from the beginning. And in so doing, I'm learning or picking up stuff that I should have learned back in the day. But this is not for me to share when I'm recording other musicians. This is when I'm sampling, because for those of you who haven't given it a go, sampling, well, it puts you into what I would describe as a fugue state, a state where you can no longer remember what you've done, you can barely count to two, and it's a form of repetition coupled with, because I like recording things very quietly, I think that's where the magic is, combined with shallow breathing that leaves you as high as a kite. And there's all sorts of pitfalls that can destroy the soul-destroying process of making a sample. So for the first time on camera, I'm gonna let you look inside my secret. Robbie, any chance we can make that light a little bit? Ow. So what I think I'll do is I'll move through the process literally from the first mod, and that process starts with the first transient. Problem is, say you're hitting a glass with something like this. It's quite a soft beater that has a form of frictional contact with the sample subject matter. This soft kind of give here that will, if you're recording stuff really close and really quietly, will emit a something. And the difficulty we have when editing, this has been something I've struggled with for 37 years, is where does a sample start? Because where a sample starts, where a transient is, where the mod is, i.e. the modulation that you see within the waveform, and where the note starts are entirely separate events. So I've started, for certain types of samples, transient based, using something that doesn't rely on audio or a digital audio workstation, but instead relies on MIDI. This little thing. It's a Roland module TM1, and I've got the trigger there. So what I do is connect the beater to that and set the sensitivity all the way up to full, and then it produces a MIDI event. That is where the sample starts. And this, particularly with this beater, will give me what I need for pretty much the quietest hit. And particularly when you're recording stuff that's really quiet and maybe the transient isn't that obvious with things like this, there's something undeniable about a MIDI on event. Let's reset that to 0. I'm going to do kind of quiet, quite loud, and not the idealist thing. So here we go. Slate, PPP, Ugly Vase. Okay, so here we go. the super secret section, starting with this mini little watch here. And what this is, it's a knitting thread counter. And what's great about it is it's designed for people to count their threads whilst knitting, so they work as a little ring. What I use this for is counting round robins. It sounds ridiculous, but if you're doing a long day's sampling, you will lose the ability to count time and time again. Even if you're doing something like 5 round robins, you'll always forget. And I feel that one of the ways of really helping with the post-production of a sample library is the ability to absolutely deliver everything that has been specified in whatever the shopping list is that you've created before the sampling session. If you come back with instruments where one note has 4 round robins, another has 7, another has 5, by using this counter, you can be really uniform. And what that then means is when you're tidying up the Pro Tools session, you can just actually look by just counting 5, and then you'll know it's the next note, and then you'll know it's the next note. So that kind of consistency is really helpful. And if I'm using a beta, I'll just reset it with that or with my other hand. Then slate, reset on the thingy dooball. Okay, so this is MF, or MP. And again, noise, and again. The next thing I think is really important is the ability to recall what it is you have done. And whilst there are amazing studios, particularly in the UK, where extensive notes will be made, this kind of fugue state that you go into, you really want to move through as rapidly as possible. And what I don't want to be doing is making extensive notes when I'm concentrating on the sound of what I'm doing. So something that I do, which is really important, is something called slating. Slating refers to when people used to draw on a clapperboard in Hollywood, and it would be on a piece of slate, and it would be with a bit of chalk, but it's an audio slate. A really clear signal, but also a microphone that isn't getting in the way. What's great about it is I can have it way away from where I'm working, and it'll sound like it's right next to me. It'll give a clear signal even if I'm mumbling and falling asleep. If we're working with water or outside, that's just to protect it, but it serves no function other than that. Right, onto this top tray. Other thing I've started doing, what I always insist upon in a session, is just to keep the whole thing running. Now, sometimes we may want to work with clicks, we may want the DAW to rewind, etc., but there will be some source somewhere that's running continuously, usually a mix pre. And the thing that I now do is, with this little camera, which I can clip anywhere, I'll put the camera in a vantage point that is maybe out of sight if, say, we're doing BTS, and I'll record that into my MacBook Pro using just QuickTime. That then can be something that you import into the Pro Tools session, so you're not only listening to the slate, you can actually see what's going on, particularly with all of these esoteric samples that I'm going to be making over the forthcoming weeks and months. Some markers. I think the reason for that is I've got a stationary fetish, and it always makes me feel more comfortable if I'm in an environment that there's at least one Sharpie in. It says 5 on this thing, so it must be 5. So that's the recording part over. This is the coolest thing in my survival kit, because it's the only bit of stuff that was actually designed as a bit of survival apparatus. Mic phasing. Often we'll use more than one mic. What we do is purposely vary the proximity. So something usually very close, something that gives a player's perspective, and then something that gives something more akin to an audience perspective. The difficulty with that is that it introduces all sorts of phasing. Just been working on a project which produces long, slightly fluctuating tones, and that phasing can cause phase cancellation. So something that is certainly I believe standard practice for Deutsche Grammophon is phase alignment. And this is a gadget to give me a very definitive transient that's loud. That is, I mean, it's really remarkably loud. That basically I will always hold to the closest mic. And even if there's like ambient mics way over there, it's a very defined sound that travels very well. It's so loud that my ears have actually just started ringing. The further the distance of mics, the more of a, well, it's like a different signal entirely. But when you've got like them proximate, you do get this effect called phasing, which is when a mic signal is kind of close and you get waveforms that are almost matching but not quite, and it gives a phasey type effect, particularly with an oscillation like this. So the RE20 is closer, so that you'll find that it just takes this amount of time for the sound to get to the vase, to the Tascam over there. So what we have with this click-clack is just a really defined transient modulation there. It's undeniable. And what I'm going to do is just select, that'll select all of them, I believe, yeah. These are manufactured by a company in Birmingham, in England, called Acme. How cool is that? And you'll see that there's a little United States thing on there, because they were a United States issue to the 101st Paratroop Regiment for the Normandy D-Day landings. And basically what they, when you chuck a bunch of people out of an aeroplane with parachutes, is they drift all over the place. So they need to find each other. And they're in enemy territory, as it would have been back then. So this was a way of everyone identifying each other. So it's one click to go who goes there, and 2 clicks for someone to go friend, not foe. Thing is, because they're entirely nickable, and a lot of these paratroopers would have been captured, there was a directive that they were to only use them for the first 24 hours of the D-Day landings. So there's 7,000 of these knocking about, none of which are usable because they're made incredibly cheaply and subject to oxidization, which I don't think would give you that kind of pure transient. I don't need to explain what that is, but I don't think any musician should ever leave home without one. Right, next up, Sanity. I think this is a really important thing when sampling. It's a drudge. There's a bunch of things that can enter into a sampling session when boredom sets in. And that is I hate to sound like a hippie, but that is a slightly unhappy energy going into the samples. But also, by getting bored, there's a tendency to rush. So truncating notes or letting notes crash into each other, not being as meticulous in maybe some extraneous noise coming into the recording. But also, certainly my objective when I'm sampling, even across a bunch of dynamics, is to find the place, and the example of using a beta like this, is to find the sweet spot where the sample has its most sonorous quality for the dynamic level that we're providing. So often what will happen is I will change betas and move around the object I'm hitting, just an example of a percussion instrument, in order to find that sweet spot. And the only way I can describe it is a moment, and I'm sure it's psychological, a moment where the sample creates a slightly choral quality. I don't think it is actually creating a choral quality. I think it's a psychological event that happens in your head when something becomes as relatable to a human voice. And it's all relative. It's all like, oh, that's a horrible tinny sound, that's a bit purer. And then there's something that just, relatively speaking, sounds slightly hymnal about what you're doing. So that attention to detail is absolutely vital. And in order to do that, you need to stay kind of happy and sane and not rush. So the way I've gotten around that are these blighters. What the phase cancellation is doing is actually masking the oscillation of the vase, which is very pronounced. Because basically you've got a sine wave type of thing crossing over out of phase. Now, when I phase align it, and you may prefer the sound of the non-phased align. And I guess that's the point with like rooms and all of the phasing effects with reflections and stuff like that. You get a homogeny of sound, and it can iron out things that are less pleasant. This is an oscillation that's based on two tones within the same glass that are about, I think slightly less than, but about a semitone apart. So let's just so it's in our kind of ear memory. So you can hear a little bit of the... Now, when I move it into phase alignment, you suddenly hear that oscillation become a lot more pronounced, but also the fundamental, which is created by that main oscillating kind of sine wave, becomes, you know, like markedly louder compared to... It's a dull, thuddy sound. And I've got terrible touring musicians' ears, but I think that is a real sign, particularly where sampling is concerned, of these artistic choices you need to make with stuff like phase alignment. They're not headphones. You can buy swimming versions. These are just a cheap running version. What's great about these is sit on your temple like that, and the closer you get them to your ears, the better. And they simply vibrate and create sound through vibration, not through by projecting sound through the air or into your ear. Now, what makes these so great is that they keep your ears free. So with human hearing, I believe you are capable of focusing in equal amounts to a maximum of 3 different sounds. I think this is what enables us to have conversations whilst being very alert. So as a consequence, what I'm basically dealing with is some information coming in from here, whilst also being able to listen to whatever I'm working on acoustically, to be able to hear any extraneous noises that are coming in. I run them very quiet just to be safe, particularly if I'm sampling on my own, and I'll usually run some spoken voice. I think that when you're dealing with rhythmic stuff and with tonal stuff, that I think can interfere with your perception of what you're actually recording. So a bit of Louis Theroux just keeps me sane, keeps things ticking along, and occasionally I might actually put something on the computer screen and watch it with this. The other thing that this is absolutely great for is if you're recording and you're recording with maybe a template and you're recording with a click, what you can do is actually turn something up really loud that's very low and filter out the top end, and you just, instead of hearing it, you just literally feel it tapping on your head. So these have been life-changing. And also, just to kind of overshare, these are what I fall asleep to, because they don't go in your ears. And I have to warn you, noise cancellation, it's not cancelling any noise. It's doing a thing called phase cancellation. So everything you think you're not hearing is going into your ears. So I think they're reasonably priced, you don't lose them in your bed, and you can put them in your sampling survival kit box. So here I think is a good depiction of the problem we have with where a sample starts. Is it here, or here, or here, or here? Well, this is me just probably rustling around, you know, with something to get ready, having a crisp or something. This is the transient, that bit that happens when the forces of physics collide with inertia, releasing a sudden burst of sound energy that goes into fuel a vibration, or the note, which starts here. But what about this? Well, this is actually the change in air pressure caused by me sweeping the beater in towards the vase. However, this is the MIDI trigger, the point at which I would say my performance, my mod, my note, and therefore sample truly starts. By cutting all of the audio to these MIDI notes, I know that it's not a question of transient or modulation, of waveform, it's actually when and where I played the note. Other things that are problematic, as I mentioned, like a bit of boredom or fatigue enters into it. So I don't believe in those horrible Red Bull energy drinks and stuff. Good old-fashioned Dextra energy. And whilst we're remaining pharmaceutical, Imodium. I never not go to a sample session without those. The number of sample sessions I have from maybe 15, 20 years ago where every third note or every fifth round robin has a stomach rumble in. Again, often recording these things very quiet, and particularly with small objects, we are very intimate with them, and you'll have a mic here, your stomach's here, you've just had a massive chicken shawarma for your lunch, which I wouldn't recommend, and suddenly you've got the tummy rumble. So Imodium is the way to go. Ending on a boring note, but always take a drive, never presume that the studio has a spare drive for you. This is a SanDisk, super fast 2 terabyte drive, and it's a Thunderbolt connection. So I always take a Thunderbolt cable, but also some adapters just in case they're using slightly more old-fashioned Macs. So that's it. The cat is out of the bag. The clicker, the round robin counter, the MIDI trigger, these are all my special secret weapons, survival devices to get me through these sample sessions, which can be laborious, can be incredibly testing physically, as I was mentioning, shallow breathing, all of that stuff. However, I've been making samples for 37 years and I still have yet to tire of that sample coming out of the oven, seeing if the loaves have risen in the way that you'd imagine. I get a real high off it.